are. Where's the Irish people? And you're still above the table. God bless you, huh? Let's hear from the Irish people. Applaud the Irish people. Wonderful people, Irish people. So the story about the Irish woman coming back from Europe. She goes through customs. Customs official said, do you have anything to declare? She said, what would I be declaring? He said, do you have any booze, any whiskey, any liquor? She said, absolutely not. They said, we have to ask you to open up your bags anyway. They opened up the bags, there's 3 bottles there. Customs official said, what would that be? She said, that's holy water. He said, well, I got to taste it anyway. He opens it up, he said, madam, that's 100% Irish whiskey. She said, saints be praised, another miracle.
Oh, good evening, and welcome to February's Monday night special episode of the Savage and Starbuck Show. I'm your host, Joey Savage, here with my lovely co-host, Starbuck. Good evening, Starbuck.
Good evening, Joey, and welcome, listeners. The clip we just heard was of tonight's guest, the Professor of Fun himself, Tommy Moore. You can find Tommy on Facebook as well as on YouTube, and his website, profcomedy, P-R-O-F, comedy.com, and you can learn more about Tommy's life and background on Wikipedia. Welcome to the show, Tommy.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolutely, we're thrilled.
You know, it's funny that you started with an Irish joke because I don't even do that anymore. I do that like once a year around St. Patrick's Day, and I'll tell you a story about that. I was doing a St. Patrick's show on a Wednesday, and I did all the Irish jokes, and that weekend I was working at a comedy club doing my comedy club act, and a guy came back to me after the show and said, oh, I can't believe it. I said, what? He said, I saw you on Wednesday do the St. Patrick's Day show in the afternoon, and I said, this poor guy is so good, he probably only works one day a year on St. Patrick's Day. And then I came to see you this weekend, and I see a whole different act. You know, I see you doing a comedy club act, and I told him, that's how you get to work for 40 years, by being versatile and being able to play to different crowds. Because I've been doing this for 40 years. I started in 1974, and that was before even the comedy club boom. I mean, I started working in supper clubs, places like Palumbo's and the Log Cabin Inn and the Copacabana in New York. These places had like red velvet drapes and crystal chandeliers and bands in tuxedos. And they started to wane toward the end of the 70s, and I was worried. But luckily, in the 80s, comedy clubs hit, and it was big. It was the golden age. Matter of fact, they said if a restaurant or a nightclub wanted to fill up, all they had to do is put the word comedy in a handwritten sign in the window, and people would line up. It was amazing. They say there were 1,300 comedy clubs around the country. There were 22 comedy clubs just in Philadelphia, and I never had to leave my city to make a living. Everybody wanted comedy, so we were on every TV show. We were interviewed on every news show, every morning show. We were on every telethon, and it was so big that Temple University actually called me and asked me to teach a course in comedy, which I did for 5 years. And, I mean, I lectured. I told them the tricks of the trade. We brought in panels of guest comedians for question and answers. We critiqued students' different routines. From that initial class, which was so successful, I wound up doing 5 more courses. We did, like, the history of American comedy and the legends of comedy and comedy from A to Z and stand-up comedy performance, and then humor as a life skill. And from the humor as a life skill, people started to realize that humor could be good corporately to reduce stress. And I got calls from AT&T and IBM and DuPont to do stress lectures through humor at their companies. And it was just a ball because, for instance, I went into one company once, and the president of the company said, you have to make these people laugh. I said, why? What's wrong? She said, I just had to tell them that I was diagnosed with a terminal disease, and they're all very depressed. Please make them laugh. Now, there's a handful to work with. So the first thing I did was I brought up the president of the company, and I did some magic tricks with her, and made her laugh. And when she laughed, they laughed, and it was a piece of cake. That's what you've got to do. You've got to be very, very versatile. You've got to be versatile enough to deal with any kind of an audience, any kind. I mean, when comedy clubs started to close up, I started writing a newspaper column called Comedy Corner, and I talked and interviewed everybody from George Burns to Red Skelton to Joan Rivers to Red Fox, and they taught me a lot about life and a lot about comedy, and one of the main things is to be versatile. So when the comedy clubs really closed up, I started doing resort hotels in the Poconos and the Catskills, and I started doing cruise ships. And in the afternoons, I even did, like, tour groups for day cruises. And all of those audiences are different. And I found out in order to appeal to different audiences, you've got to keep who you are, but you've got to tweak it just a little bit to realize that audience's sensibilities. And my friends always said, you know, you've got a million stories from working all these different places and from working with all these different comedians. You got to write a book. So I did that too. I wrote a book called, A PhD in Happiness from the Great Comedians, where I talk about 50 different comedians that I worked with and for, and what they taught me, not just about show business, but about life, because a lot of show business lessons are very similar to life lessons. And I got to tell you, 40 years in this business has been the greatest experience, because think about how good this business is. Okay, every night you're at a party, you're the center of attention, you make people laugh and applaud, they compliment you, and then you get paid.
Wikipedia says you halted your birthday celebration at age 6 so that you could watch comedian Jack Carter on TV, and then when he was done, you came back and blew out your 6 candles. Is that when you kind of knew you wanted to be a comedian? How did you get started?
As a matter of fact, my uncle said, "What kind of kid is this? He stops his own birthday party to watch a comedian on TV." But I'll tell you why. I heard that Jack Carter made $5,000 to do 5 minutes on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I said, $5,000 for 5 minutes, and there's no heavy lifting. This is my job. This is what I want to do. But the real time I realized I wanted to do comedy, I was sick as a dog one time when I was a kid. I had 104 fever, and on top of that, I had the measles. And I was in bed for like 4 days and going stir crazy. And I just begged my parents to let me come downstairs and watch TV. So they wrapped me up, brought me downstairs, put me on the couch. Jimmy Durante, great old comedian, was on TV. And I watched him, and when he was done, I realized that I felt better, because during the time I was watching him and laughing, he took my mind off my pain. And I said, if I could ever do that for another human being, that is the greatest thing I could ever do in my life. Now, fast forward about 3 years, we went to see my uncle in the hospital. He was very sick. And I was just so nervous about being in hospital. I'm very hypochondriacal. And I was so nervous that I made a joke, and I made him laugh. And for the 10 seconds that he laughed, I saw all the pain leave his face. And I said to myself, I can do that. I can do that. And I remember walking out of that hospital, and the only thing I was thinking was, I can do that. And that's all I've ever wanted to do for the rest of my life.
You told Joey and me earlier when we spoke to you that you didn't set out to be the, quote, professor of fun. So tell us how you got that moniker.
Well, okay. From teaching the course at Temple University, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Greater Pennsylvania called me and said they wanted me to do a speech after a week's worth of stress courses that they had given their employees. And I said, okay, I'd be glad to. And they said, now we want you to be a professor and do a valedictorian-type speech. I said, well, okay. And they said, we want you to wear a professor's cap and a gown. And I was like, I really don't want to wear that. And they said, no, we really want you to wear it. And I said, I really don't. And they said, well, you have to wear it or we'll get somebody else. And I said, well, what does the job pay? And they told me. And I said, okay, I'll wear the cap and the gown. And I said, get me the cap and the gown. And they said, no, you have to buy the cap and the gown yourself. And I said, what wasn't the job paid again? And they told me, I said, I'll buy a cap and a gown. And I put on the cap and a gown, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I said, this looks funny. This looks clownish. I said, let me try it. And I went out, and I did it with the cap and the gown, and I have performed with the cap and the gown ever since.
Wow.
And that's how I became the professor of fun.
Mm-hmm. Did they give you an honorary doctorate? I think that would be
No, and more importantly, they gave me the check.
Yeah.
When they gave me the check, I was happy.
Tell us about how companies and individuals benefit from your seminars and where listeners can find your book.
Well, okay. When I do seminars, I talk about the importance of humor and laughter in just relieving stress. And everybody knows that laughter reduces endorphins and it helps your body physically. They say that laughing for a half hour is like a half hour of internal jogging. It's just tremendous. I mean, even in the Bible it says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. You know, they say laughter is the best medicine. That's the oldest quote in the world. And I talk in my stress seminars, not just about that, but I talk about the same kind of things I talk about in the book. And in the book, I talk about all the comedians that I've met and what they've taught me. I mean, Jay Leno taught me how to be myself. Jerry Lewis taught me how to have faith in things. Milton Berle showed me how to take a mental vacation from stress. George Burns taught me how to always do what I love to do. Jack Benny taught me how to savor things. Alan King taught me the importance of being in control. Nipsey Russell taught me how to deal with hate, and Joan Rivers gave me great advice on being judgmental. You know, all of these great comedians gave me great life advice that does translate into show business advice, because show business, standing on stage, is just like being in life, except everybody's looking at you, and hopefully they all paid admission to do it.
So where can we find your book?
You can find that book on Amazon and Kindle. So go to Amazon.com and just type in Happiness Comedians Tommy Moore, and you'll get there. And, you know, it's funny, you can also find it on eBay. So, you know, eBay's got it. I'm not selling it on eBay, but because I would screw up the book.
Someone is.
But somebody is. And the funny thing is, they're selling it all over the country on eBay, all over the world on eBay. I'm getting emails from people from India who read the book, people from Australia, people from Wales. It's amazing. I'll tell you a quick story. Elaine Boozler read my book, and she wanted a few copies because she's got a great charity called Tales of Joy, and I sent her a few copies. Tales of Joy is a great charity that helps no-kill animal shelters. And if you go to her website, which is talesofjoy.com, it's T-A-I-L-S, talesofjoy.com, and you go to the shopping section and you go to Elaine's Fun Stuff, you'll see my book there that not only did I autograph, who cares, but Elaine Boozler autographed it too. And she's selling it, and all the proceeds go to help no-kill animal shelters, and she does a lot of great work with them.
Oh, that's great. You speak about how the healing power of comedy. You know, you mentioned your story with your uncle, and I think it's, you know, pretty much been proven scientifically that comedy heals. You suffered a traumatic assault in 1986, and we'd like you to tell us a little bit about what happened and how that changed your life and how that informed your career going forward.
Okay. I had been a comedian for, maybe 15 years at that time, and I was, long story short, in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was in the middle of a robbery, and the robber hit me on the head 9 times with a pipe. I think it was 9. I think after eight you stop counting, you know. And he tied me up, and he put a gag in my mouth, and he tied my feet, and he tied a noose around my neck, and he tied me to a pole, and he left me there to die. Now, luckily I had been a magician, so I knew how to get out of bonds. I got out of bonds and got out of the situation, and they took me to the hospital, and they sewed me up like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. And I was there in the hospital for 3 days, and every comedian on the East Coast visited me or called me, and they all made me laugh. As a matter of fact, the guy in the next bed should have paid a cover charge. But they all made me laugh, and I realized firsthand as an audience member how laughter can take your mind off your pain. Now, a doctor and a club owner came in and said, you know, you may never stand on a stage again, because I was in head-to-toe bandages and casts. And I said, you want to bet? 3 days later, I was booked to do a show at LaSalle University, and I did that show. I did that show in head-to-toe cast and bandages, and I was introduced as direct from the emergency ward, Tommy Moore. And after the show, students came back and thought it was a gimmick. They thought that the bandages were just a costume, and I said, no, it's so real. And the way that it changed my life is it didn't change my life. It made me realize that I wouldn't let it change my life. It made me realize that I wanted to make people laugh first, last, and always, and I wasn't going to let that stop me. And since then, I've done over 3,500 shows and seminars, everything from colleges to cruise ships to resort hotels.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, psychologically, that's got to do something to you. Did the comedy help you to get through it, or did you have another way of dealing with it? I mean, because that's got to change you.
Well, the comedy helped me get through it, and a belief in God helped me get through it, too. You know, I strongly believe in God. I'm not a preacher. I'm not going to lay anything on you. But if you get the book, you'll get a little bit of God in there at the end. I think you have to believe in a higher power. You have to believe in your fate, and you have to believe in yourself. Did it change me? No. I didn't let it change me because, very honestly, the only thing I ever wanted to do since I was 6 was be a comedian, and as long as it didn't change me being a comedian, it didn't change me at all.
Oh, that's amazing.
What is your writing style when you write your comedy? Do you save it on little bits of paper all around the house, or like me, or are you very organized and write at a specific time all the time?
Nope, little bits of paper all around the house. The thing is, the kind of show I do is really a variety show. It comes from watching Ed Sullivan when I was a kid, because I didn't want to be just a stand-up. I wanted to do a little bit of everything to entertain everybody. So in my show, I do like 10 different kinds of comedy. I do one-liners, I do observations, I do stories, I do out-and-out street jokes, I do comedy magic, I do audience participation, I do improv, I do hats, I do props. I even do sing-along at the end. I'm up there to entertain. And, you know, that's one thing. Most comedians today want to be commentators. I want to be an entertainer. I just want to entertain the people. I want them to forget all their troubles, all their worries. I want it to be like a trip to Disney World. Take your mind off all the things that are in the world and just have a fantasy for 45 minutes or an hour. That's what I do. That's what I want to do. And that's a real key to being a comedian. You've got to do what you want to do. The greatest piece of advice I think I ever got was from Phil Rosenthal, who got it from Ed Weinberger. Now, Ed Weinberger was the producer of the Bill Cosby Show. Phil Rosenthal was the producer of Ray Romano's Everybody Loved Raymond.
Right.
Phil asked Ed, what's the best piece of advice you can give me? And Ed Weinberger said this: do the show you want to do, because at the end, we all get canceled. That's not a bad piece of advice for life either.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely right.
So the funny thing is, I do the show I want to do, and when I first started in comedy clubs, I was very, very different, because everybody was doing observations, and I was doing magic and props and improv, and it blew people away, and like I was a headliner instantly, because nobody was doing what I was doing. It was so different. And that's another thing I tell young comedians: try to be different. Find out who it is you are, and try to be as different as you can be from the other sea of comedians out there.
So, this touches on something else and you even touched upon it earlier when you were talking about the golden age of stand-up comedy and how comedy has changed over the years. You've managed to hold on to a classic style. That's clearly your philosophy of comedy is being an entertainer. But you've managed to hold on to something that really harkens back to another era of comedy. We were talking about why I selected the clip that we chose to open the show with, which is a really classic joke, and that just really appeals to me. And so I wanted to know how you approach comedy to appeal to all audiences.
I look at that audience. One of the things you have to do is know before who you speak. Young people laugh at different things than old people. Married people laugh at different things than single people. I've got like 5 different shows. I've got a comedy club show. I've got a senior citizen show. I've got an ethnic show, Italian, Irish, Jewish. I've got a southern show. And then I've got a comedy magic show. I can be church clean or I can be comedy club naughty. And when I say comedy club naughty, I mean like PG slight R.
Right.
And I can take my basic act and tweak it 20% one way or the other and work to any kind of comedy audience there is. As long as they came there to laugh, I'm going to get them.
Well, we've had a wonderful evening with you. I'm really
Absolutely.
glad you stopped by.
Thank you, Joey, and thank you again, Tommy, for sharing your story and all of your insights. Once again, you can find Tommy Moore, the Professor of Fun, on Facebook and on YouTube, as well as on his website, profcomedy.com. He is also involved with Elaine Boozler's charity, Tales of Joy, TAILS of Joy.com. Remember that Tommy's book, A PhD in Happiness from the Great Comedians, as well as Joey's book, The Vanilla People, are both available on Amazon and on Kindle. I am Starbuck, wishing everyone a great night. Keep on laughing.
Thank you, guys.